Imagine a people being oppressed, forced to work without rest. A leader born in the heart of the Egyptian Empire, destined to change the destiny of millions. This is the story of the slavery of the Hebrews in Egypt and Moses' epic journey towards freedom. But what made this struggle so powerful? And what can we learn from it today? If you want to understand how resistance and faith can transform destinies, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell for more stories powerful like that. But what happened when Pharaoh refused to free the Hebrews? How did Moses challenge the most powerful empire of his time? Stay with me and find out. The arrival of the Hebrews in Egypt and the historical context. The story begins with Joseph, a Hebrew who, after being sold into slavery, achieved a prominent position in Egypt as the Pharaoh's trusted administrator. He was responsible for saving Egypt from a devastating famine and, as a result, was able to bring his family to live in the land of Goshen, a fertile region where they prospered. However, after the death of Joseph and generations who remembered his deeds, a new Pharaoh took the throne, someone who did not know Joseph. This new ruler viewed the population growth of the Hebrews with distrust and fear. For him, the demographic expansion of the Hebrew people was a threat to Egypt's political and military stability. There was a fear that in the event of war, the Hebrews could ally with external enemies and weaken Egyptian rule. As a reaction, the Pharaoh adopted a policy of oppression, subjugating the Hebrews to slavery. Just remembering that at the end of this report, we will make an analogy with today. I believe that if you leave without seeing this, you will miss something very important for your life. Slavery in Egypt. Inhumane conditions and resistance. The Hebrews were subjected to extremely exhausting forced labor, being forced to build cities such as Pithom and Ramesses, which functioned as administrative centers and supply depots. Under the scorching desert sun, they carried huge blocks of stone, dug canals, and erected monumental buildings, all in inhumane conditions. Pharaoh's objective was clear: to weaken the Hebrew people, breaking their spirit and suffocating any possibility of resistance. However, even in the face of brutality, the Hebrews continued to grow and multiply, defying Pharaoh's plans. This resilience was a symbol of the strength of their faith and unity as God's chosen people. The genocidal decree and the birth of Moses. Frustrated at not being able to control the growth of the Hebrews, the Pharaoh made an even more cruel decision. He ordered the death of all newborn male Hebrews. This genocidal policy aimed to prevent the Hebrews from forming a future generation capable of resistance. However, even in the face of such a decree, there were acts of courage. The Hebrew midwives, fearing God more than Pharaoh, disobeyed the order. This was one of the first demonstrations of organized resistance against oppression. In this context of despair and courage, Moses was born. His mother, defying Pharaoh's order, placed him in a basket and left him on the banks of the Nile River. Destiny, however, had something special in store for Moses. He was found by the Pharaoh's daughter, who, with compassion, decided to raise him as her own son in the royal palace. Thus, Moses grew up with privileges, but without losing his connection with the Hebrew people. This duality between the palace and the suffering of his people would be crucial in shaping his future as a leader and liberator. The faith and identity of the Hebrew people. Slavery in Egypt not only represented physical suffering, but was also a great test of the faith and identity of the Hebrews. Even in the midst of oppression, they maintained their traditions, their culture, and their belief in the God of their ancestors, which helped them resist. This unshakable faith was fundamental to their survival and the construction of a collective identity that would unite them even more in the search for freedom. Pharaoh, in turn, underestimated the power of faith and the unity of a people. His attempt to crush the Hebrews only strengthened his resolve, setting the stage for a divine intervention that would forever change the history of Egypt and the Hebrews. Moses, the chosen one to liberate. Moses is the central character of this narrative, symbolizing courage, leadership, and redemption. Not only was he saved from certain death, but he was also educated in the heart of Egyptian power, gaining knowledge and skills that he would later use in his mission to free the Hebrews. Even though he lived in the luxury of the palace, Moses never forgot his origins. He felt the suffering of his people and was later chosen by God to be the liberator of the Hebrews. The liberation of the Hebrews culminates in the Exodus episode, one of the most remarkable events in Judeo-Christian history. Moses, confronting Pharaoh with a message of let my people go, challenges the tyranny of the Egyptian ruler. The Pharaoh's initial refusal led to the manifestation of the 10 plagues, each symbolizing God's power over the gods and natural forces of Egypt. Finally, after the 10th plague, the death of the Egyptian firstborns, the Pharaoh allowed the Hebrews to leave. Just remember that at the end of this story, we will make an analogy with today's days. I believe that if you leave without seeing this, you will miss something very important for your life: the Exodus and the formation of a free people. The Exodus was not only the physical liberation of the Hebrews, but also marked the beginning of their transformation into an independent nation. During their journey through the desert, under the leadership of Moses, the Hebrews renewed their covenant with God and received the 10 Commandments, which established the moral and spiritual foundations for community life. This experience shaped the Hebrews as a united and determined people who would face even greater challenges in their search for the Promised Land. Moses, by leading them on this journey, became an eternal symbol of leadership and faith in times of adversity. Reflections on slavery and freedom. Slavery in Egypt is more than a historical or religious narrative. It has become an archetype of resistance and overcoming that inspires generations to this day. The Pharaoh, with all his power, could not defeat the faith and hope of an oppressed people. His attempt at absolute control ended up paving the way for liberation and redemption. Furthermore, this story highlights the importance of individual and collective courage. Moses' mother, the Hebrew midwives, and Moses himself demonstrated that small acts of bravery can have an immense impact. Legacy and relevance. The episode of slavery in Egypt transcends its time, echoing in different historical and cultural contexts as a symbol of the fight against oppression and the search for freedom. Liberation movements throughout history have been inspired by this narrative, which demonstrates how the memory of a people can be a catalyst for change. The figure of Moses continues to be an icon of leadership, justice, and faith, and the journey of the Hebrew people reminds us that, even in the face of the greatest adversity, liberation is possible for those who persevere in hope and unity. The story of the slavery of the Hebrews in Egypt and Moses' leadership towards liberation resonate deeply today, as they can be compared to various situations of oppression, struggle for justice, and overcoming that we still face in the contemporary world. 1. Systemic oppression and inequalities. Just as the Hebrews were subjugated to inhumane conditions by the Pharaoh, many populations around the world face systemic oppression, whether for economic, political, social, or cultural reasons. Marginalized groups, such as ethnic minorities, indigenous peoples, and impoverished communities, still struggle with the weight of a modern Pharaoh, structural inequality, which often deprives them of basic opportunities, such as education, healthcare, and decent housing. For example, workers subjected to extremely exploitative conditions in some industries can be compared to the Hebrews forced to build cities and monuments in the scorching heat. Even today, millions of people struggle to survive in precarious jobs while facing barriers that limit their voice and participation in society. 2. Population growth and fear of the other. The Pharaoh's fear of the growth of the Hebrews can be compared to the prejudice and xenophobia that still exist today. In many nations, the growth of migrant or minority communities is often perceived as a cultural, economic, or political threat. This fear leads to oppressive policies such as severe immigration restrictions, discriminatory laws, and social exclusion. Pharaoh's decision to oppress the Hebrews in order to control them reflects the challenges faced today by those who are seen as different or competing for space and resources. 3. Resistance and acts of courage. Just as the Hebrew midwives resisted Pharaoh's orders out of fear of God and respect for life, today we see people and organizations disobeying injustices for higher values. Human rights activists, community leaders, and individuals who stand up against oppressive regimes represent this courage. Such cases as environmental defenders who risk their lives to protect their territories or activists who confront authoritarian governments are modern echoes of the resistance of the Hebrews in Egypt. 4. Moses and transformative leadership. The figure of Moses as a liberator can be compared to contemporary leaders who lead struggles for equality, justice, and freedom. Just as Moses had to confront Pharaoh with courage and determination, today we see leaders, such as civil rights advocates, denouncing oppression and mobilizing communities. For example, movements with Oh Black Lives Matter, who fight against police brutality and structural racism, or indigenous leaders who protect their people from land invasions, echo the mission of Moses, to give voice to those who have no voice and guide the oppressed towards freedom and dignity. 5. Modern Exodus. The search for freedom and justice. The Exodus, the liberation of the Hebrews, and the formation of a new national identity can be seen in the contemporary struggles of communities seeking emancipation and justice. This can manifest itself in several ways. The struggle of refugees fleeing wars and oppressive regimes in search of safety and a dignified home. Independence and self-determination movements of peoples seeking freedom from modern colonialism or oppressive regimes. The search for gender equality, where women challenge centuries of patriarchal oppression, reaffirming their role in society. Just as the Hebrews faced challenges in the desert, many liberation movements encounter obstacles, but perseverance and hope for a better future drive them forward. 6. Faith, unity, and overcoming. The Hebrews' faith in God and their unity as a people were fundamental to their survival and liberation. Today, spirituality, whether in the form of religion or universal values such as empathy and solidarity, continues to be a foundation for those facing adversity. Communities that come together in times of crisis to overcome natural disasters, pandemics, or social injustices reflect the same resilience of the Hebrews. Conclusion: lessons for the present. The story of the Hebrews in Egypt is not just a story of the past, but a powerful symbol that resonates in many situations today. It reminds us that oppression, regardless of its form, can be faced with courage, unity, and faith. And above all, it shows that even in the darkest circumstances, there is hope for liberation and renewal. The analogy between biblical times and today inspires us not only to identify with modern pharaohs, but also to follow the example of Moses and those who fight for justice, helping to build a freer, more equal, and more humane world. If you were inspired by this story of faith and overcoming, don't miss the next chapter of this incredible journey. Subscribe to our channel, activate the bell, and be sure to follow more powerful stories of transformation and resistance. Join us and be part of this journey towards freedom. See you in the next video.